Welcome to Erickson G Architects. I'm Gary Erickson. I'm going to take you through some drawings, some old drawings. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'll just talk about sketches, drawings, master planning, architecture, and just the art of the drawing in general as my first introductory video. Let's just start with this one. This is an old drawing of mine that is about the desert city. An ideal desert city around the UAE, but it could be anywhere really. I was hired by HOK to do these. This one's exceptional because there is really no context. They just wanted to have an image, just an image to talk about the city. Now keep in mind these are planning reports, so this will go with a lot of text and numbers and explanations and speeches. It usually gets printed about 6 feet high, and then it gets shipped to the Middle East, and then there's a big conference. But for me, I'm just doing a drawing. Now, some people call it a sketch, but the word sketch is not a good word when we're talking about drawings. A sketch means some sort of off-the-cuff, lazy, sloppy thing, which, has its beauty, but hey, we really can't talk about planning and architecture in terms of some sloppy lines. Really, it's a way of projecting an idea into space. People with a lot of very important interests, huge volumes of money, look at these drawings as a way of just contemplating the problem. Really, it's a kind of a problem setting, a problem seeking, if you want to use HOK's terms. When I do it, I come from my own personal background as a fine artist and someone who studied art history. And I try to channel on architects and artists of the past when they try and image a city. Beautiful Renaissance paintings, draftsmen like the Renaissance draftsmen, Raphael, Michelangelo, the major artists of the time. And all the way through time into the present. So I'm channeling that. Now I know that seems like a lot to say for this kind of exercise, but when I do it, I'm doing it, and if I've studied that, it influences me. So really, I think there is a bit of an overlap between an artist's employment, which is what this is. It's a job. You're an architect, you're a designer, you create an image, and what you've studied and what you've learned. The program I went to, UBC, try to take people from different backgrounds and thank you. Try to take people from different backgrounds and integrate them into the profession in different ways. And this is just my way. This is just how it worked out for me personally. This first drawing is interesting because it has a limited color palette. It has a simple gesture. It puts together a texture, an urban texture from a certain point of view. And it talks about urbanity. I mean, it's about defining what is urbanity for the desert. What kind of civilization are we talking about? Now notice it's not actually very futuristic. It's not one of those, wow, look at the monorail and I can see forever, or that looks like a spaceship landed there. It's really more about a classicism. And at that time, in the late 90s, we were dealing with clients who didn't want to just bulldoze over the heritage of the region. They wanted to bring in some classical Islamic ideas into a modern cultural context, urban planning, and there were a lot of interesting people around. Some of them were from Vancouver, where I went to school, and they were looking at urban development. This was Emaar, the great real estate development firm. So this is just one small exercise. Now, as for drawing in this context, I'm not saying this is the way things are done anymore. This was just me playing with my career at the time in the place in Toronto, going out there occasionally, but trying to image their culture from whatever media that I had. And my chances were not necessarily any better than theirs, because when you go there, there really wasn't a lot of media recognition of the historical nature of their culture. So I drew things from old engravings, for instance, and I spent not too long, but long enough looking at drawings from the period going back a couple of hundred years. And that just helps me go to a place where I can start to innovate, start to draw, start to import ideas like what is a garden? What is an urban plaza? How high are buildings, generally speaking? And that's, you're always talking about the Z dimension most of the time when you're talking about these things. How are uses established? What is it like walking along a street, looking up at a tower, walking down a boulevard, for instance? Is it a place you want to cross the street, or is it a bit dangerous? And it tends to be, in those cultures, kind of high volume traffic and not very pedestrian friendly. How could you make something with a density more friendly? So those outstanding questions, they all get addressed in these sketches. Even the slightest parallel lines going into the distance will start to draw together different ideas about urbanity. So let's go into the next one. I'm going to have to go from my cover shot to a slide presentation now. I'm just going to look at different drawing types at first. This is a totally different type of drawing. It was done in Toronto for a Toronto client, University of Toronto, McLuhan Center. They wanted to bring together different development ideas, a tower, a student residence, the McLuhan Museum, some old buildings in the city they wanted to museumify, or they wanted to put under glass, or an atrium. And this kind of drawing is really just like an essential bare sketch, and sometimes it's best that way. And it has a lack of skies and trees and clouds and cars and all those things that, although entourage it's called, sometimes don't have anything to do with the ideas in general. This is just trying to bring the modernity of the idea, of McLuhan's ideas, into a form. Now, this may never happen. A lot of my drawings are never going to see the light of day. They're really talking about ideas in the essence of what they could be. It's best sometimes to do that, to stretch the envelope and to open up the process to different things. Eventually, things are going to get squared up and they're going to get shut down, but some things will survive. And those things are sometimes better left open for as long as you can. The critics come pretty well fast enough when you're talking about budgets. This may never happen. Who knows what the McLuhan Center decided to do with its property? I can't tell. I'm just there the first moment, and it's a charrette, and I'm told, look, here's an hour, sketch something. So all right. But when I do sketch these things, I don't just make an image of something I've seen before. I've seen none of this before. Really, I'm taking basic ideas and I'm grafting them into space. In my mind, I've got all the plans of all the levels, and I've got the structure, and I've got the elevators, and I've got all that in my head, as every architect does, worked out in detail, because I've done this so many times. I've just done every level so many times, done every elevation so many times, and I really don't want to see what I've done before repeated. I just want to see what I can do with it as an expression. This one here, there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of randomness that I like, and organicity that I think goes with the subject, and crude coloration, because I like diagrammatic coloration. I like things to be so clear that you cannot mistake it even from a distance. You can say, yes, there's a picture of McLuhan. It's pink, I like that. And I said those hot spots are pink, so you know where to go to with your eye to see something. And I like also the kind of dirt, call it the dirt, that musty, misty, grubby background. The technical term, I guess, would be a surrealist ground, but we just call it dirt. When you work on something and it gets a bit dusty in there and you've smudged it, it actually gives it a certain atmospheric quality that you wouldn't have just with a super clean drafted drawing. The scrubbiness of the hatching, I don't put sketchiness into lines like some people do. It's like, I'm going to make a sketchy line. My hand just does that the way it comes out. Why? Because I do it really fast. And I'm talking seconds here. So I have no actual conscious control over the sketchiness. It's not about that. It's about a drawing. It's about speed. It's about accuracy. And accuracy, you should be able to have an actual CAD model under there. It should be fine. with no distortions. I'm thinking about structural overheads. I'm thinking about mechanical overheads. Can't help it. I can't help it. Because I may someday get this job. I may still get this job because this image floats out in the world. It may come back to me someday as a job. So I can't just say, oh, I didn't know, Your Honor, design court. I didn't know that I was going to get this back. No, things are done with an intentionality. And without it, you really are just talking about some sketch. My intention is to make drawings, not sketches. Here's a totally different thing. This is done at IBI Group. And this was a competition again for a velodrome. A velodrome is where bicycles go around in a circle. A great event. Being a cyclist myself, you can tell from my stuff back there in my studio. We cycle a lot. So this was given to me as this little special problem. I had about an hour or two to do this. So come up with something, yeah. So I took my helmet off and I said, there you go. So this is the helmet velodrome. Obviously, it's a bit of a doc, it's a bit of a corny joke, but on the other side, there are so many parallels with construction and domes and helmets. It's almost humorous. I was working with Rod Robbie, he was alive at that time. We talked about how to make a stretch PVC covering, how to use conventional structures to support a dome. He was the master of domes after all. And if you look at the velodrome label on the right hand side here, you're looking at a layering up of a concrete formed base, a ridge, which is almost like the part that stretches over the dome, that attaches to the structure, and then you have inside, and I think I used pencil just to keep it kind of dusty, an intonation about an atmosphere, things going on inside, and layering of a structure, all in just a couple of angles and lines. Right there above the velodrome sign is really the whole content, and then it just peters itself over the arch of the dome. There's one idea. Didn't work. They chickened out. They went for something more conventional, I guess. But I still love this idea, and I think I'd love to see it happen. You never know when idea isn't going to come up later on you. Now the rest of the drawing, I have just slapped it in there because who has time for this? But sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's better not to spend a lot of time on stuff like, oh, look at the hedges, and oh, these students are just the right kind. I'd rather not have students of the right kind. I'd rather just have human beings in a space, abstracted, like the structure. My conceit is to draw everything with the same kind of line. Physical bodies, architectural bodies, the same. This is a skull. This is a skull projection. These little heads are skulls. My hand goes around in a circle with that skull. My hand goes around in a circle with the other skull. It really should be ideally almost the same speed of line and intention and touch. Touching the objects in the space in your mind the same way. That makes my little drawing machine a consistent device to express things I want to say. And the other pictorial devices like the landscape on either side and the little figural elements, which are just double lines with a circle over it, is my way of abstracting human beings. I got this from Raphael, who would, in the most minimal lines possible, contain a body on two sides, with one line on one side, one line on the other side. It was just the best shorthand device. So that's that one. We should do another. And yet, for something completely different, this is Dubai Marina. Now, Dubai Marina back then it was called Westside Marina. It's the famous project in Dubai with the Burj Khalifa. This is the landmark first project. While they were digging the canal, we're thinking the first residential development. I heard that this was one of the most successful condo developments in Europe and the Middle East. They sold out. So this landmark project, real estate terms, I love those. This really was a landmark project. This is the first one out there, and it's pretty difficult to miss in a desert environment when you have towers. Not a lot of competition back then. Now it's a forest of towers. This sketch here, I'm just going to talk about making drawings. I can't talk about, of course, the details of a confidential project. This is an Emaar project. This was not just me. I'm just the deliverer of the dinner. There are a lot of cooks that go into making this, and I want to give them full credit. Everybody collaborated on this, from the principal to all the other designers and architects. People put their drawings in there, their ideas in there. Another architect did the CAD model. This was drafted over. This is drafted on film with a pen and pencil and printed on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper has chalk rubbed on it. So this dusty storm going over here, this desert storm, is really just chalk, and it's rubbed and rubbed, and on the bottom it's put on thick chalk and it's erased off to look like wind. These are really almost ridiculously old techniques that you would see hundreds of years ago. A lot of handwork, a lot of pushing things around. The black is just markered in on this print paper. This used to be the way things were done back before computer times. Now, today, Photoshop, please. It's all Photoshop. But I like this desk because it's really what we really do every day. I mean, people romanticize, let's say, a Michelangelo drawing. Oh, look at the beautiful chalk on the paper. He must have really knew his medium. Well, that was just what was around. He'd pick up a piece of chalk off the ground and that's what he would use. There was nothing entirely special about everyday design drawings. If you use a pen, and I think I use a fine liner for this, and some everyday drafting supplies that were provided in the closet, there's nothing really special. Now, the chalk is a bit special, but that kind of chalk is not special chalk. That is your blackboard play school chalk that you would get from an art supply store. It's not about the medium. It's just about, and more importantly, what you do with it. And that's what makes drawings great. It's not the technology. If you want technology, computers, painting, layering, this strips away those devices. You only have your ideas and the very basic substructure of your graphic mind. That's all you get. So, that makes it more, in a way, like pure, like math is to physics, drawing is to art. My ideas, thank you. So, let's shut this down. It's been great talking to you. I hope to talk about drawings again if you are a drawing lover, and see you soon.